Thanks for staying with us. This is Daybreak, and we thank you and appreciate your company here on the broadcast. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Dr. Martin Olo is an advocate of the High Court, also the Associate Dean at Daystar School of Law. Sheila Olang is Development Economist, and Kevin Walumbe is Litigation Counsel at Katiba Institute. Yes, Kevin, you had a point before we went to break. Please proceed.
We were talking about the parliamentarians' subservience to the executive power.
Yeah.
You know, what I want to say is that the chickens will always come home to roost. So what has been happening between the executive and parliament, it has come out in the open, and now we have parliamentarians lamenting that what the president was telling them to do, and they did, of course, with a few boosts here and there, as we have had, of allusions of payment for them to do certain acts. And now they are coming to say that the president is undermining their legislative power. Yeah. But this is not far-fetched. You know, the other day, Honorable Otiende Amolo was saying, was lamenting of the lack of space for debate in Parliament, that bills are brought, and then just a few people are given an opportunity to say something on the floor, and then the bill is passed. But that notwithstanding, I want to talk about the role that the judiciary has played in maintaining some sanity, even when there is a lot of wayward behavior between the executive and Parliament. Mm-hmm. Of course, we have seen in implementation or in interpretation of the Constitution, the judiciary has played a big role, and that has come with a lot of pushback, especially in budgetary cuts. We saw yesterday the Chief Justice saying that with less than 1% of the entire budget going to the judiciary, then most of its services are really grounding to a stop. So we should push for at least increased budgetary allocation to the judiciary so that it can perform its functions. Yeah. So that it is not going back to kneel before the executive for it to be given money to do its constitutional mandate. Then there are a few other pushbacks that have been used at least to try and intimidate judges. Like this is a case in point was the withdrawal of the security of Honorable Justice Mugambi, who sits in the Constitutional Court, because of the decisions that he had made. So some of these things are happening, but we are at least courageous that Kenyans know what they want. At least some institutions appreciate what Kenyans want, and the institutions are trying to push towards implementing what Kenyans want.
And Dr. Martin, Kevin paints a picture of the childish obstacles that Kenyan politicians always place on the path of progress. However, talking about budgeting, this is a critical process, is it, that Parliament has the power of the past. But ideally, is the understanding there first that it controls that power of the past, and that it's a guardrail and placed at a very critical juncture to push and turbocharge the prosperity of this, the implementation of this constitution?
You know, we have talked about Parliament, and Kevin says that one of the members of Parliament says that there is no space for debate. The truth of the matter is that this Parliament is too unwieldy and shallow and does not have the capacity to even appreciate what its role is. You've just made a very important point. With this new constitution, budget making process moved from the executive into the National Assembly, into Parliament. The office of budget, the budget office in Parliament, is the most powerful office, initially held by Ndindi who? And others.
It was now rebelled.
Yes. So the point I'm making is that actually decision-making on how resources are allocated is in Parliament. Do they exercise that? No. What are they saying? They are crying, talking about the executive. What an oxymoron. But the point is that do they understand what they're saying? The one thing that I want to say, and maybe this is very important, I'm advising my good friends here, Sheila and Kevin. Because politicians are making noise, and Baba has started talking about counties, it's time that other narratives also are brought up. For example, let's say the size of parliament is too big, let's reduce constituencies. That will help counter this conversation. Let's say that we need to reduce the size of executive and grow the cake for the counties. In other words, as politicians are bringing about narratives, they need counter narratives. So I'm giving free advice here. If we don't bring counter narratives, their narratives will run. And the reason why they're bringing their narratives is to keep leading the conversation and to keep making us follow them. So we must also anticipate them and begin to bring other counter narratives. But the bottom line is, let's leave this constitution the way it is.
Okay.
Let's find ways of implementing it, not ways of amending it.
Yeah.
And if they want to, make it impossible for them to agree. Because remember, for this constitution to be changed, there will be compromises, and there will be negotiations, and there will be deals. Make it impossible for parliamentarians to agree, make it impossible for governors to agree, make it impossible for MCAs to agree, and therefore we'll have no agreement and no negotiation around the constitution, so we'll continue to implement it the way it is.
And Sheila, one certainly big portion of our Katiba that stands out so beautifully is the Bill of Rights. But it seems we have fallen short of that beauty in living up to what the Constitution envisions, is it, when you look at the catalogue of human rights violations that have been committed by the two governments since this Katiba came into effect?
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I agree with Prof that we as the people need to redirect the conversation back to the issues that actually matter. Look at the implementation of just the Bill of Rights. Let's look at what the Constitution says versus what we have been going through. I think sometimes the administration hopes that we have very short memories, that we forget that Boniface was killed, that Albert Ojwang was killed, that 60 people, we are still not accounting for them, that we tend to forget all these things. And then now we want to run on to the brightest and the newest project at hand. We will not forget these things. We still have a lot of questions about human rights violations. I saw that DIG Langati is back in the office now. We still have, life is continuing as usual because they are hoping that we will forget. I would advise the political class that politics is a question of self-preservation and self-interest. So if I were a member of parliament today and I wanted to continue being a member of parliament, I would look into saying what ensures that I protect myself as a member of parliament. What is my role and how am I performing in the role that is at play? Because as you saw, if you're in bed with the executive can turn around and say, well, parliament is a problem, which is exactly what happened.
It's a good turnaround, isn't it?
It's a wonderful turnaround. When I saw that, I was really, I was grateful. I was looking at the president and I was saying, good job, finally.
And they
so you guys
take
need to
tea at State House.
They need to, yes, there was no taking tea at State House all of a sudden. Now they were all saying, oh no, but we are doing this for you. And now they're ousting themselves, And so I was very proud. Kudos to the president for finally, saying that, okay, you guys are not doing what you're supposed to do, and it should be vice versa. So everybody understands their role and what they're supposed to do. Meanwhile, as we're having these conversations, we are being robbed in broad daylight as a country. Broad daylight. And even right now, as you're talking about channeling the conversation, we are trying very actively at grassroots level to condense a lot of the issues that we're having with odious debt and corruption. That is current. Forget what happened 3 years ago. Today, just with SHA alone, the fact that you have a hospital, I was just reading today, you have a hospital called Hanano Nursing Home, which is receiving more money than Pumwani. And we don't even know where this nursing home is. I mean, that should be the headline. Yesterday at the Devolution Court, they should have been starting with asking themselves, well, where is this? And it's not just talk. Talk is cheap. Who are these people? Who is sending money to these places? So that we find our money. As it is, the budget is tight as a country. We don't have enough money to do what we're supposed to do. I keep driving the conversation back to the economy, back to corruption. Can we fix these things first before we have all these broader conversations? Otherwise, then the political class remains completely out of touch with the Kenyans that they're supposed to be representing.
And for that reason, we must continue the narratives. We must also generate new conversations.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, these guys with their agenda will continue to occupy us.
Yep.
So we must be able to pull them back, tell them, wait a minute, yes, you are calling out. It's one thing to call out corruption in parliament, but you're not saying something about, okay, say it's SHA, thieves will be. This is your flagship project, for heaven's sake. Why would you let looting happen around it? The housing levy, your flagship, you've put in your risks, you have put your life on line politically. How would you let it be saddled by corruption and so on? So really, the president has a responsibility.
Absolutely.
To call himself to order.
And this is and when I sat down and actually looked at SHA, the intentionality behind SHA, the increase in transparency around SHA, the fact that we had a website you could go into and look at a facility and see how much it's been done. These are wonderful developments that we have as a country. I mean, kudos to the administration. This is really good. So now why would you let it hang and not see that it's implemented through with the intentions that they were supposed to be implemented through? I don't know, this morning when I woke up, the website still was not up, you know, so that we can go back and crunch the numbers again. Because what we are trying to do now is we're trying to come up with a very simple, digestible information about how much money is being stolen. You know, as we always like to say, Amkeni tunaibiwa, eh? Wake up, Kenyans, wake up, tunaibiwa. Because the numbers I'm seeing here by now would have already fixed the dispensaries back in Migori County, where I come from, where we need medication. Pumwani cannot receive less money than a nursing home that nobody knows that exists. As women, I mean, we rely on institutions like Pumwani for maternity services. This is completely outrageous.
Yeah, and Kevin, this is where now much needs to be fixed, is it? That the essentials are really wanting: healthcare, education, infrastructure. This is somewhat three key pillars that Katiba gives lives to, given their importance in our economy. But seems at any given turn, the policy players will overlook that.
Well, these things are actually core issues that are provided for under the Bill of Rights. When you look at access to the basic compulsory education, that is under Article 53, the rights of children. And you see, the rights of children are a special category that their rights have to take priority. So if the capitation towards education is messed up, then you are destroying the foundation of our future generation. And, you know, an educated person can hold the government to account. So I don't know whether the government does not want to be held to account so that it messes up the very basic need that will enhance human understanding. And for development to occur, you need educated people. Yeah. So, secondly, with regard to health, under Article 43, I believe the devolution of health, whereas services are said to have been devolved, I don't believe that the money has been devolved, because when you look at procurement, who is conducting procurement? I believe it is KEMSA, and under what arm of government does that fall? Is it the national government or is it the county government? So you cannot only devolve the services and withhold the money and then be giving it out in bits. The other day we were having cries about shortages of ARVs for persons living with HIV. And this has been an ongoing concern for Kenyans, that their right to health under Article 43, especially with the withdrawal of the US aid, is a problematic thing. And here we have a government that prioritizes other things other than the basic things that are supposed to be done. So when you come and you have a government that is prioritizing renovations, let's say in State House or other facilities, and yet there is no funding for education, there is no funding for health, then what are you looking at? So I agree with Dr. Olo that our advocacy should be focused on priority areas. So I believe the Kenyans that are listening can push towards diverting the funds that are going to wastage and divert them towards the basic required services under the Bill of Rights.
And Dr. Olo, President Kibaki may not be alive to what's happening today, but Kibaki's kids are educated, tech-savvy, connected, urban, mobile, in giving life to this constitution, is it? Given how they also translated the finance bill in 2023 to virtually all the mother languages in Kenya.
And that's the beauty of it, that when you give a people access to education, they turn out amazing. The Gen Zs, the Kibakis, beneficiaries of universal education have not disappointed, and that's a very important point. So what then we want to say is to test ourselves and to ask, when we go to Kibaki, what do we see? When we go to Ruto, what do we see? And when we go to the Ruto and is it Ruto Rigathi, Ruto Kindiki, what do we see? I think the issue here for us is that every government ought to be having an agenda that we can live with. No. And granted, by the way, when William Ruto was campaigning and he had this bottom-up strategy and he had the the bottom-up economic transformation, it's a good message. It's a powerful message. It is actually saying, let's bring ourselves up from the bottom so that everybody is included in the economic development of this country. The question is the promise and reality. What happened to the promise? What happened to the good strategy? And what are you doing about it? Now they're walking around with the fundraisers or some kind of things they are calling empowerment. You don't empower people by giving them tokens. Forget about it. So basically what we are saying is that we have a country that has basics that we need to work with. We have a constitution that has given us a number of lines that safeguard us. Number one, there's a basic structure to that constitution. It says separation of powers. There are people who will tell you that the reason why corruption is being slayed is because EACC is not prosecuting. No. Let EACC investigate. Let it recommend. And let the DPP prosecute separation of powers. Even in the police force, the DCI investigates and the OCS recommend, and then the OCS is the one that says these charges can be provided. OCS is a very powerful office in the criminal system. Yeah. So that there is always separation of that power. So when we look at it, there is pre-commitment strategies doctrine, for example. We have said 15% to all these levels. We have said national here, county here. Those are pre-commitments. We've said give judiciary funds, give the legislature funds. We have also gone and said in chapter 15 that these commissions will provide additional checks and balances. Those are pre-commitments we have. So when you start touching this constitution, you must not touch some of those basic structures that were put in place in order to safeguard ourselves. So I would like to encourage us, and I'm also not giving up on us and perhaps also not giving up in those in public spaces. We will continue to call you out. We will continue to tell you where your promises are right, we'll tell you so, and where they are not, we'll tell you so. So that the young people of this country require to live in a country that gives them promise, a country that allows them to fulfill their potential, a country that allows them to thrive. Not a country where they're begging, not a country where they have to keep shouting in the streets in order for them to be heard. No, they deserve to be on the table. But even if they are not on that table, they deserve that those on that table are inclusive. They think about them as well. So we shouldn't be saying they are an afterthought. Indeed, this country is young, this country is youthful, and everything we do must be seen to be going towards building that bulge of...
And Sheila, what do you make of the charges that have been pressed against youthful protesters, the Prevention of Terrorism Act preferred against them, when they protested, and the silencing of online dissent by the state?
That's what I refer to when I say that it's quite unfortunate. I mean, that we are here and we are celebrating a Katiba, and yet some of the biggest violators of the spirit of the Constitution is, in fact, the administration. You cannot confer terrorism charges to young people who are protesting. You cannot kill somebody because of a tweet. And no matter how much they expect that we'll forget about this, well, we will not forget about this, you know. I think the state sometimes struggles with trying to find balance between understanding a people or a population who are, again, products of this new constitution. Like I always say, you have 75% of this population under the age of 35. I mean, these are people like, I went to school during, you know, the Kibaki time where when we were going to primary school, we didn't have to pay anything to go to primary school. So we have a very different disposition in terms of our intellect and understanding of how the country should work. We are the same generation who will put in the work. We have the time, we have the internet, we don't have jobs. So we'll put in the time to actually understand the policies that are in place and everything that is going on. So when we see these are just attempts to silence dissent, when you're charging people with terrorism within our own quarters, and yet you have a lot of security issues. I think don't get me started about the foreign policy issues that we are having now with Sudan and the rest of them, and the backlash that is going on in the US. That's a different conversation. But Ayub, I think it's always, it's a wish that Kenyans are going to forget and then refocus, because it seems like every day we wake up and we're focusing on a different narrative. And some of us are at pains at asking ourselves, I still don't have money in my pocket. I still, my children still cannot go to school. I don't see a future ahead of us. There's no jobs as young people. Yeah. But instead, you're quick to be charged with terrorism. Instead, you cannot tweet anything, and then you're silenced. And nothing comes out of all of these conversations. How about we go back to understanding the roles of the different institutions, make them empowered so that they can actually work? A good example we saw was with IPOA during the death of Albert Ojwang. When you had the head of IPOA standing behind, the suspect, exactly, the suspect there and looking like it was a toothless dog. Those do not bring confidence as a people. I'd like to say that the trust deficit in the country is horribly low. It is horribly low as a country. And if I were the administration, I would ask myself, how do I go back to regain the trust deficit? So even when you're having conversations like, how do we reform this constitution, then people believe that, you're well-intentioned.
Yeah. And Dr. before I come to Kevin, our dispensation also gels smoothly with binding international treaties, is it, including the Geneva Convention, the Convention, and also how to set up generally the question of statecraft, which policy players seem unable to comprehend.
Yeah, in fact, earlier on you had referred to that op-ed about whether we should abandon democracy
and become a monarch.
And then I want to tie it back to this issue of charges. Yeah. Our understanding, or when you're looking at our constitutional development, one problem that is clear, or one trend that's clear, from the Kenyatta administration and generally African leaders, is the tendency and the reluctance by our leaders to be democratic and to open spaces. Rather, the tendency to fall back to the colonial ways in which we were ruled to get inspiration. So Kenyatta was trying to fuse, his being a chief, of a tribal chief, and the presidency. That's why he had a problem with the prime minister responsibility. So he wanted to be both the head of government and head of state, so that he fuses those two things. Now, the problem with that is that you begin to reflect the colonial power, because it was about the governor and the queen. And then you begin to look the same, and your language begins to be the same. So, people who are fighting for Mau Mau in this country were called terrorists. People who are fighting for independence in South Africa were called terrorists. The young people who are fighting...
Mahatma Gandhi in India.
Yes. The young people who are fighting for their space in this country are being called terrorists. Nothing has changed among our political class, because they still look at power in a total sense of imperial presidency. That then means any opposition to them must be outlawed. The issue of shooting to kill, shooting to maim, is a very colonial perception of power, and that power should then not be challenged, and if it's challenged, that person should die. The idea that we should protect property more than we should protect life is a very colonial reference. So our challenge as a country is to outgrow our history, to outgrow our colonial experience. The beauty about this constitution, it gives us that break. Yeah. That is why the political class must keep fighting it. They don't fit in it, including Raila himself. Doesn't know what this constitution is about. He's struggling with things that he's saying that we need to do away with the provincial administration. It's not in the constitution. So why do you want to touch the constitution to deal with it? You want to say that you want to dismantle the current devolved units. Yeah. That is not what you need. In fact, you need to give more power down to the people if you really believe in what is happening. Yeah. So this issue of why we are signing up to international treaties, why we are signing up to democratic ideals, and yet we ourselves are not ready to practice, plays out real, takes us back to our problem, which is We have not outlived our colonial experience. In fact, when the colonialists gave us a better constitution at independence, we wondered why they were giving us this constitution and yet they ruled us the other way. And that's why Kenyatta began to amend so that he could look like the governor.
Yeah, and Kevin, it's concerning, is it, when you look at the cases. For instance, in May this year, Missing Voices documented 159 cases of extrajudicial killings and disappearances, the highest since 2019. And this follows, of course, the year 2024, given the events around what happened with the breach of parliament by the protesters who are against the punitive tax proposals. It seems we are unable to match the threshold of the sanctity of human life that Katiba appreciates, but the policy players seem don't.
You know, Katiba Institute is a member of the Missing Voices Coalition, and we have been keen and party of the documentation. So when you speak about these enforced disappearances and extrajudicial killings, it drives home. It really hits to the heart with the Katiba Institute. And you see, what happens is that the powers that be want to drive a certain narrative, then crack the whip on using that narrative. For example, if you start labeling people as terrorists, you are trying to drive a certain narrative and head toward a certain category of people. Then cracking the whip is that even if you carry out actions that are not legal towards these people, then nobody is raising eyebrows. For example, if somebody is disappeared, you know, and enforced disappearance is a situation whereby you are taken from home or whatever it is, and then you are not taken through the processes of fair hearing or rule of law. You are taken to undisclosed places so that the law now does not cover you. Nobody knows about you, and you are outside the purview of the law. So even if you are killed or you are held incommunicado, nobody knows about that. And this is to perhaps meant to gag the people. But the beauty with our Kenyan people and the youth especially is that we are not easily cowed. So even if the numbers are rising, numbers of those extrajudicially killed, numbers of those whom we believe have been disappeared because there is no trace of the people and there is no information regarding their whereabouts. Sometimes they turn up dead, or sometimes they turn up in very desolate places and disheveled. So what we are pushing for is that even if there is police reforms that we have been advocating for, but this is an all-rounded narrative that should be going around. We cannot depend on the police alone to implement Katiba and to, deal with the disappearances. In any event, these are the same police are the ones who are being accused of enforcing these disappearances. Yeah. So it is a black history sort of, but I believe with the kind of access to information instant that we have, any event that happens, it is like every Kenyan is now a media house because these things are reported immediately, and the outcry of Kenyans somehow holds the police and the perpetrators of this enforced disappearance to account, so that somebody does not go missing completely because there is that outcry. Yeah. And we hope that this is not going to continue. Yeah,
and Dr. Olo, it seems that then the political class has no understanding of how short-lived their actions are, given the trumped-up charges against the youth voices who have called for good governance in the country, and the apparent life expectancy of their actions, which points to the reality that it cannot survive within this current dispensation, that the environment is too hostile for their very bad political behaviors and mannerisms.
That is actually, that's the beauty about our current situation, that even President Ruto knows that he risks serving only one term, because the pressure around him is so much that he has to re-engineer himself to be able to get a re-election. So that is beautiful. So the political class will continue to do what they do, but so will they continue to meet the resistance that is coming at them. What is the alternative? Do the right thing, keep the promise, serve the people, not yourself. To the extent that you are serving yourself, people will come at you. People will question you. And that is happening. So these conversations about whether it's 1 or 2 terms, it's a good conversation. Because the one who is in power needs 2 terms, that's for sure. But those of us who are outside are saying, no, you have not lived up to your expectations in this one, so why should we give you another? That is a good conversation. Let's have it. Whatever you say. So even when he says that they are only saying 1 term and not they are not saying what they want to do, of course they are opposing you. So they will say what they think works for them, and that's also a good thing. Politicians and political class have to face the reality. And the reality is they are dealing with a more enlightened group of Kenyans with a more enabling constitutional dispensation than ever before. Do they always run the risk of trying to claw back these gains? Yes. Do they want to see how best to navigate even without being accountable? Yes. Every time there is people in a political office, they will always be looking at ways of stretching and expanding spaces for themselves. And that's why the Constitution comes in, and that's why the people come in, and that's why principles that we have enshrined in Article 10 come in. We tell you, hey, we don't know about it. Can you tell us where public participation happened? So that space has been opened. So whoever is trying to cheat himself knows that at some point Kenyans will face them and ask them. Because these issues, Kenyans have them. They will get it. You hear what Sheila is saying. They are looking at the website. They are trying to mine information. They'll get it, and they'll bring it to your face. So do the right thing.
Yeah, it's a good concept of a democracy, is it, Sheila? That then today, everyone, including the president and the presidency, are living up to the reality that they are subject to checks and balances, that if they then manage to dilute the influence of Parliament, there's a public that is waiting for you at the ballot.
Absolutely. I always tell people the biggest fight that we're preparing for is at the ballot in 2027. I know that traditionally as youth, we haven't showed up at the ballot. We've just kind of been sleeping around and hoping things work out. But for the first time, this is affecting us. This is now personal. The fact that we were killed, the fact that we tried to, we took our time and actually understood, translated key elements of happenings in this country, such as the finance bill. We have the capacity to understand what is going on. We know our rights. And so unfortunately, some of these tactics can only work with a population that is either, is not able to express themselves or is not informed well enough. The biggest fight that is coming, and I always say this, is I don't know what you will do to 75% of the population to make sure that they don't show up at the ballot in 2027, because that is the only way that they're going to save themselves. Without that, we are taking, voter registration cards, we are keeping our IDs. A lot of us now, we are so scared of using our IDs, we try not to use them because we don't want to lose them. We're worried that, we might not get them easily enough because we'll need them in 2027. So we're starting to ask, can we accept other forms of identification, like a driver's license or something, so we can keep our kitambulishos and passports, because in 2027, that's where it will be at. And this will really happen even at a grassroots level, right? It's not just the presidency. Sometimes we focus so much on the presidency. I think we're also beginning to understand that the weak links are also with the people at the grassroots that we elect, whether it's parliamentarians or MCAs who are not checking the governors and the rest of them. So, like I said before, it's a question of self-preservation. If you're an MCA, you're supposed to be checking your governor. If you're not checking your governor and you're in bed with the governor who is not performing well, home direct, everybody's, we're going to push them out of the system. But my advice is also that this administration, when you look at the better economic plan that it enforced, it has some really solid, good ideas and good programs in place. If they could only just shift and go back to what that meant, if they could only shift and go back to the administration that was so worried about, extrajudicial killings, the River Yala happenings, that now they're just doing more in broad daylight with cameras in full glare and not enforcing them. If they could only go back to focusing on that, because as I said before, this is the most low-risk, politically speaking, revolution going on, because it's not like they're saying we have a candidate. They're just saying do what you're supposed to do, and it doesn't matter who's there. I always say I pity whoever is trying to take over as the president, because the checks and balances will be even higher and even more. We are not going to relent. It's not a personality contest. It's a contest of making sure that we have a system that works for absolutely everybody. So, I mean, at the end of the day, the way I look at it is, again, let's go back to the elementary level questions that we have as a country. Where is our money? The ODS debt? Where is development? Where are the jobs? Stop killing our youth.
But Sheila, as a development economist, it's rather appalling, is it, when there's a complete shift from the economic forums and the forums that the Kenya Kwanza had administration before the campaigns, the units that are very county-specific, to now what's appearing to be an empowerment program targeting the women and our mothers. I mean, what explains this sudden shift economically?
I think it's a shift that is trying to use politics to solve economic problems. It's a shift that is completely out of touch, if you ask me, because of the simple reasons that there's nothing wrong with trying to offer a boda group bodas. Again, sometimes they misconstrue this as trying to say, do not give people money, do not give people equipment, do not give them boda. There's nothing wrong with giving bodas to somebody who is a boda rider. I think that's really great. The question is the devil is always in the details. What is the policy around this? What preparations have you made? I'll give you a practical example. Let's say you set out and you say, I want to go to Migori County and I want to give X number of bodas, pikipikis so they can use for bodas. Map them out. Who are these people? Have you done capacity building for them? What is the long-term plan when you're coming in to give them this? What is your target? And how do we make sure that sustainability is going on? Transparency. Where did the bodas come from? And why did you choose Group A and not Group B? Because, again, we are a country of how many million people? If you want to give all of us bodas, then that will be, you're creating different issues. Yeah. The last bit of it is also, this will not solve this is not how you inject into the economy. This is absolutely not how you do it. Yeah. You need to have a policy level intervention, meaning that your role as government is to try to enable the private sector meet your development needs. What you need is policy in place that we have a friendly business environment. Ease of business, that is not improving. We work on your indicators at the top, but also at the bottom. If you're salaried today, you have less money in your pocket. How do we resolve that? You have less money today if you're a salaried person than when we started off. You're making a sacrifice with a country where only 30% is actually in the system. The rest are outside of the formal system. So when we see somebody coming up with political solutions to economic problems, then we know that we're in a lot of trouble. It is an economic revolution, Ayub. None of this is going to work, because at the end of the day, if you cannot take your child to school yesterday, if you were not able to take your child to school yesterday to afford that school fees, if you went to a hospital or a dispensary where you were being gaslighted and told there's medicine, but there was no medicine, and then you're seeing millions of SHA being milked away, that will just go back to backlash. Okay, so let's sample the feedback. Kevin, I'll come to you. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak and State of the Nation. The SMS code is 22422. Bob Otieno says Constitution has largely worked for elites, not Wanjiko, as it was meant for, especially for politicians. No wonder they have started calling for a referendum to amend it. Like Kishon Laban says, pushing constitutional reforms now, when Ruto's regime faces a mistrust and Raila seen as insincere, is unwise. A referendum likely fail. Government should prioritize health, education, rights, and fighting corruption, plus the implementation of the Constitution, not its mutilation. Engineer Lazaro says the rain started to beat us when all members of Katiba lobby watch groups ventures into politics. Most of them were ended up in various political positions and now enjoy adulterations of the Constitution. Sir Nixon Ndugure says devolution under 2010 Constitution aims to promote democratic governance and ensure there is equitable distribution of resources and services. It's therefore somehow unethical to frequent this State House to beg for development.
Lekishon again says Raila has lost credibility to push for reforms, while Ruto lacks moral authority to fight corruption amid endless accusations. Anything they propose risks backlash. It's time Parliament redeems itself, serving the people until the ballot determine their fate in 2027. Sheila, Sweden, says, as Kenya marks 15 years since the promulgation of the Constitution, the uncomfortable truth remains. We have seen more breaches than gains in its implementation. We celebrate a document we have consistently contravened. Yes, Kevin, and mixed array of views is it in the call for and the plea for its implementation, and the political class who seem to lack the moral credibility.
We started off by saying, there are mixed reactions, and we can see that indeed that is true. There are mixed reactions. One of the reactions is that this constitution is serving the elites and not the common mwananchi. You realize that when you have the power to implement, sometimes in Swahili, kila mwamba ngoma huvuta kwake. You will start by first taking care of your interest before you take care of the interests of others. But this constitution, the way it was meant, it addresses the common mwananchi, does not address the elites. So that is why it is very easy for the executive or parliament or the judiciary to be taken to account, because there are an array of ways through which this can happen. So I do not believe the constitution was meant for elites, but it has been implemented in such a way that those who are benefiting more are those ones who have access to resources, or those ones who have access to power, or those ones who are perhaps in higher positions in government.
Yeah, but it's also a framework that ought to be working for the people, is it not the political elite? Ideally, our Katiba does not marginalize any party, is it, Kevin? That it works for anyone, any Kenyan.
Yes, in any event, the Katiba is very Wanjiku-oriented. What I've said is the way it has been implemented, it has been skewed to benefit a certain class of people. But we cannot say that the benefits have not reached the common mwananchi. At the very beginning, we were saying devolution should not be touched, because at least the services have been devolved to the people. Yeah. So the implementation of devolution, if it is done correctly, and then everybody is going to benefit. And the mutilation that is being proposed to the Constitution should be resisted by all means. This constitution is a very good constitution for Wanjiku if it is implemented fully. So let us focus on implementing rather than bringing other clauses that will bypass the already existing clauses. If you look at what is being introduced with regard to NGCDF, this is an issue that has gone the full breadth through the courts up to the end. Now that the Constitution resisted it, they are pushing for, changing the Constitution so that they can embed it into the Constitution. Let Parliament play the role of oversight and legislation, and let these resources be implemented at the county level the way they are supposed to be.
Yeah. And Sheila, the last time we had an amendment push, it disastrously ended with an egg on the face of Kenyatta, Raila, and the handshake team. Somewhat amendments have been proposed which will require the people's approval, of course, to some extent, because of the people's power question. But ideally, from what Kevin points out, we are living in days where we are not living the everyday life of constitutionalism, is it? Rather confining it to a day like yesterday, where there's a congregation of the country's leadership paying lip service to somewhat, and a majority who, by virtue of that, scanning that conference hall, will look like that they themselves do not believe in the principles of Katiba.
Absolutely. We have to walk the talk when it comes to our constitution. I'm a big lover of this constitution because as a Kenyan, it gives me power. It allows me to understand that Kenya, as we speak today, is beyond Sheila. It is beyond Ayub. It is there's a people that is supposed to be the supreme at the end of it all, and not an individual, not a political party, not a president, or whatever else. We need to walk the talk. It cannot be, sitting around for one day and not really pointing the finger at saying why are human rights, for example, violations not a core discussion that we were having yesterday on Katiba Day. I like that we had Katiba Day, on the other hand. I think it's sensitization. It gives us a way to have this conversation around what is our constitution, what is it about, and why would anyone try to touch it. I think it's really great that we had I was excited that we have Katiba Day. However, on Katiba Day, it will be a day of introspect. It should be a day of reflecting and asking ourselves, where are we and where do we want to go? And not taking it as a snapshot, like we woke up today and Kenya is just today. No, we have to ask the questions about, well, what happened last year? The administration was supposed to be protecting lives. It's supposed to be protecting human rights. So yesterday, the question would have been, where's justice for the 60 plus people who have died since last year regarding the finance bill? And even the ones who have died before that, where is the justice for it? Did we sit down and have a really deep conversation about respecting the rule of the law? The law had already said nobody should be in unmarked vehicles, dressed in civilian and going out during protests. That is exactly, we saw a lot of Subarus lined up, even in the last Nane Nane protest. These are the conversations that if you want to regain the trust of the public, we have to go back and we have to ask ourselves these questions. Otherwise, if it becomes a question of using the constitution to balance power or to increase your power or whatever it is that is going on from a political perspective, we, the people, will not allow that. Yeah.
Is the formation of the team to look into the compensation aspect just then a knee-jerk reaction?
I don't, half the time I'm at pains to explain or to justify a lot of these things that are going on. We started with the MOU. We started the NADCO report. Then we had an MOU, which I was a big proponent of the MOU because I did not want Kenya to go into anarchy, honestly. So I thought it was really good when, Prime Minister Raila Odinga and Ruto sat down and said, listen, we have an MOU, we are pulling in experts and whatever it took to stabilize the country. I was a big proponent of it. And then now again, there's a different committee in place to review the implementation of at the end of the day, we have to roll up our sleeves and really have honest conversations and get the ball rolling. So again, this committee that has been put to look into compensation, my only question is, you cannot pay people when you kill them. Where's the justice component to it? We should not be discussing compensation before we even discuss who is responsible for this. Who is assuming liability for the people who were killed, and how do we ensure that it does not happen again? Because what we are sure about is it's happening again. It happened last year in June. It happened this year in June. There was Sabasaba, Nane Nane, 25th of June. Next year, we will also be having a 25th of June, Sabasaba, Nane Nane. Will you again keep killing and then keep compensating? These are the issues that contribute to the trust deficit in this country. We have to genuinely put an end to this. So having the committee that was formed for compensation, there is no compensation without justice. Yeah. And
Kevin, when you look back at our tracks, it seems then one aspect informs the other. Hardly had we even compensated the people who the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission, TJRC, had said whose rights were violated by the state. More than 40,000 submissions made. Historic injustices largely across the country. How do you think then the mechanism with regards to this is going to work for Kenyans, given what was formed by the president to look into the atrocities that were committed against Kenyans?
Ayub, the Constitution, I believe, under Article 27, provides for equal protection of the law, right? And everybody is equal before the law. So, historically, anybody that has faced injustice or extrajudicial killing or whatever nature of atrocity from the state is supposed to be equally treated. So if after a certain push by the population, you come and set up a committee that is supposed to look at a specific group of individuals for compensation, then it means that you are, there's a sort of discrimination on who is supposed to access compensation when they are aggrieved by state actions. So going back from the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission, the report has hardly been implemented. Then here is a committee that again will come up with certain recommendations. Will they be implemented fully? And you see, there are already systems in place to follow before you can find out to what extent a person was maybe harmed by the state, then to what extent their compensation will be. So this committee, is it going to look at now maybe you are injured on the knee, you will be paid this much, and then if their report, if it is not implemented, where do you go? Because in the very first instance, for compensation to happen, the system even involves the court process. Mm-hmm. Then with an award through a judgment, people are compensated. There are already judgments that have not been implemented. There are people who are holding their awards that have not been implemented, even going back to the Mau Mau. Yeah. So this is just repeating what has been there and bypassing the laid down procedures that are supposed to be followed in law. So there are better ways of doing things, not such knee-jerk reactions.
And Sheila, one also other matter that still is unmet is the question of gender parity, and it's across board. Is that you look at what comprises of 14.6% of males and females, 7.8% staff in upper job groups across the board. Whilst the Katiba called for the fostering of gender-sensitive work environment that supports diversity and inclusion, even appointive, elective democracy, appointive, seems still not unmet. Is it therefore this need for a push to also attain that constitutional provision? Absolutely, and I'm glad you've brought it up. I think when we look at the two-thirds gender rule or implementing it and making sure that there's provisions in place to get this done, we are still not there yet. We still have a lot of work to do. And then the question then becomes, as we try to refocus on reforms and the rest of this, can we try to understand as a country why we are still having a problem with enforcing these gender rules? You know, it's interesting also as women when we look at this country and we look at the constitution that we currently have in place, where we have a legislator in place, we have the executive in place that seems to be at pains to prioritize implementing the two-thirds gender rule. Most of the time, there's a lot of misconception around it. People think it's just trying to place women in places where they are not deserved to be. But this is also, the two-thirds gender rule is also protecting men. It's trying to make sure that you have enough men in place. It's not just a women's rule. As women, these are some of the priorities that we need to make sure that they are implemented before we are even reviewing this constitution. At all levels, in fact, to ensure that we are growing a good crop or quality of women who are then able to go in and occupy these places, and men as well. So, Ayub, this is another example of certain aspects of the Constitution that we need to work on implementation instead of rushing on to then say we need an overhaul of looking at this. The question still lingers, why do we still not have the two-thirds gender rule completely implemented across board? Yeah, and is the appetite there, Kevin, from your experiences as an organization? Is the appetite there, given the communication the head of state gave when he came to power, and also the advice that was given the former head of state by the former Chief Justice David Kanani Maraga for the failure and inability to meet that threshold?
You know, this issue of the two-thirds gender rule has been discussed ad nauseum, in my view. And it seems there are no clear or comprehensive ways through which it can be implemented. But it is all about the push or the people who are in power. So if you are in a position of power, in a position where you are to appoint people to office, let's say cabinet secretaries, principal secretaries, and then you constitute a list that is not gender sensitive, it means the appetite is lacking. So with elective positions, that is, depends on how somebody sells themselves. But when it comes to appointive positions, surely we cannot say that there are not enough women who are qualified to hold positions that turn out to be imbalanced when it comes to gender sensitive or the truth as gender rule implementation. So I will say there are very many things that are usually at play, I believe, and for somebody to keep themselves in power, they have to balance. But even in that balance, I believe there are women that supported these people into garnering those positions, and they can still attain the two-thirds gender rule by appointing both women and men.
Yeah. And Sheila, one final question. Devolution has been a blessing?
Overall, I remain very positive. I think devolution has been a blessing. When I hear of all the horror stories that were happening when we had, a president that was above the law, I'm a big proponent of devolution. I think devolution has been a blessing. Again, the work needs to be done in implementing it fully, in implementing it correctly. Devolution has given us, the people, power, and that's such a beautiful thing. And mine is just to encourage Kenyans that this is, we need to protect this with everything that we have. We need to protect our constitution. We need to protect the power that lies within us as Kenyans. And we need to see the implementation of, devolution through. Yeah. Put checks and balances. Kenya does not belong to any particular individual or formation or group or whatever you want to call it. Kenya belongs to all of us. And we, the people, shall make sure that we are implementing the constitution to the letter of what it's supposed to be and continue having checks and balances. I think devolution is a beautiful thing. I think the constitution, 2010 constitution is a beautiful thing. Let's, not rush and make sure that we implement it correctly and fully, that we protect and guard this constitution with everything that we have. We've seen comrades before who have lost their lives because they were, trying to protect this constitution. We don't let them down. We stand with them, we fight with them, and we see it through. If you do a quick snapshot comparison of our constitution compared to the rest around us, we are doing very well. We're doing very well. We have a beautiful document. Now let's put it to task.
Yeah, and Kevin, is the wave after wave of impeachments that we had seen at the county level perhaps an indication how also the assemblies are empowered to that extent?
Well, we'll say that, but then when you see the reaction towards why these impeachments happen, then there is a lot of power play. Sometimes it is people-driven, sometimes it is interest-driven. So the fact that we have ways through which county governors can be held accountable and even be removed in office if they fail to perform, then it means we are good. But that same spirit should be extended to parliamentarians, because as we speak right now, they have made it completely impossible to recall a member of parliament. And just supporting Sheila, even if the devolution has bloated the wage bill because of, the number of employees that have to be supported at the county level and at the national level, devolution has made services to rich people. We should not break it.
So before we close, here's an interesting story. So have you ever in your